Before we talk about the $15 million, I need to explain why my parents told everyone in Asheville that I was locked inside a psychiatric hospital. That was the first sentence I said inside the glass boardroom in London, while three investors from Alderbridge Capital sat across from me, waiting to decide whether my company deserved the largest funding round of my life. The sky outside was gray. The table between us was polished enough to reflect the lights above our heads. Clara Whitestone, the lead partner, had my pitch deck open in front of her. But I didn't start with revenue projections. I didn't start with market size. I didn't start with the energy optimization platform that had taken 18 months of my life to build. I placed a thick folder on the table, slid it toward her, and watched her eyes move from my face to the label on the front page, Marlowe Family Risk Assessment. No one spoke. I was 29 years old. I had never been admitted to a psychiatric hospital. I had never lost control of my mind. I had never needed to be hidden away, medicated, or rescued by anyone. But if you asked people back in Asheville, North Carolina, they would tell you a heartbreaking story about Elise Marlowe, the once promising daughter of Grant and Vivian Marlowe, who suffered a terrible breakdown, disappeared from home, and had to be placed inside an expensive private treatment facility somewhere in Europe. They would lower their voices when they said my name. They would talk about how devoted my parents were. They would say my family had sacrificed everything for my recovery, and every word of it was a lie. While my parents were telling the town I was too unstable to manage my own life, I was living in Lisbon, building VeilGrid Systems, a company that used predictive data to reduce energy waste inside commercial buildings. While they were showing relatives childhood photos of me and asking for donations for my continued healing, I was writing code, meeting engineers, filing patents, securing contracts, and negotiating a $15 million investment that could change everything. They thought they had buried me under shame. They thought silence meant surrender. They thought if they controlled the story, they controlled me. They were wrong. I didn't disappear because I was broken. I disappeared because I understood something my parents never did. If people are willing to turn your name into a weapon, you don't fight them with emotion. You build distance. You build proof. You build walls so high they cannot climb them. And then, when the time is right, you let the truth walk into the room before you do. 18 months before that London boardroom, I was standing outside a small post office in Asheville with a forwarded envelope in my hand. The wind coming down from the Blue Ridge Mountains cut through my coat, but I barely felt it. Inside the envelope was a cream-colored card from my Aunt Marianne. The handwriting was careful, soft, almost ceremonial. Elise, the whole family is praying for your recovery. Please don't be ashamed. Mental illness is not weakness. Get the help you need. I read the sentence once, then again, then a third time. Recovery, shame, help. I stood on the sidewalk while people walked past carrying packages and grocery bags, and I understood with perfect clarity that my parents had not simply explained my absence. They had invented a tragedy and placed me inside it. I did not cry. I did not call my mother screaming. I did not drive to their house and demand they tell the truth. I folded the card, placed it back into the envelope, and felt something inside me become very still. Because that card told me my parents wanted more than my money. They wanted my reputation. They wanted my credibility. They wanted the right to define who I was after I had refused to obey them. And if you've ever been inside a family like that, you know the most dangerous moment is not when they ask for something unreasonable. It is when you say no, and they realize they can no longer control you. Before we go deeper, if you've ever had someone twist your silence into their own story, or if you've ever had to choose peace over being understood, leave a comment below with your city and your age. I want to know where you're listening from. And if stories about betrayal, boundaries, and quiet comebacks speak to you, subscribe now, because this one only gets colder from here. The Marlowe family looked perfect from the outside. Our house sat on a tree-lined street in Asheville, with white railings, trimmed hedges, seasonal wreaths on the porch, and windows that glowed warm every evening like something out of a lifestyle magazine. My mother, Vivian Marlowe, was the kind of woman who could organize a charity luncheon, cry during the closing prayer, and still remember which guest had donated less than expected. She lived for appearances. She understood lighting, timing, tone, posture, and the power of a well-placed sigh. My father, Grant Marlowe, was a financial advisor with a reputation for discipline and restraint. He wore navy sweaters, polished shoes, and the calm expression of a man who believed the world respected him because he deserved it. At community events, people asked for his opinion on investments, mortgages, retirement accounts. They called him principled. They called him steady. At home, he was not steady. He was controlling. He believed every dollar connected to his children should eventually pass through his judgment. If I earned money, he wanted to know where it was deposited. If I received a scholarship, he suggested how it should be used for the family. If I questioned him, he spoke to me as though independence were a temporary illness that would pass once I became reasonable again. Then there was my older brother, Preston. Preston was charming in the way unreliable men often are. He could smile through a missed payment, compliment a supplier while owing him thousands, and make people feel rude for asking him to keep a promise. My parents adored him. Preston was not expected to be practical. He was expected to be special. When he opened Marlowe and Steam, a chain of 3 boutique coffee shops, my parents treated it like the birth of a dynasty. He installed imported espresso machines, walnut counters, handmade ceramic cups, Italian pendant lights, and a custom brass logo on each storefront before he had a stable payroll system. 6 months later, the whole thing was bleeding money. Vendors were calling. Rent was overdue. Employees were whispering about bounced checks. Preston had built a business that looked expensive and operated like a cracked bucket. But in my family, Preston's failures were never failures. They were temporary obstacles. They were unfair market conditions. They were proof that the family needed to rally behind him. And by the family, my parents usually meant me. The only person who ever warned me about them was my grandmother, Beatrice Vale. She was my mother's mother, and she had the kind of quiet intelligence that made people underestimate her until it was too late. When I was a teenager, she taught me things other grandparents did not teach. Not recipes, not embroidery, not polite conversation. She taught me how to read contracts, how to keep copies of financial documents, how to open accounts that no one else could access, how to recognize the difference between love and ownership. She once told me, "A family can give you roots, Elise. But if those roots wrap around your throat, you have to grow somewhere else." When she died at the end of 2022, she left me $96,000. It was not enough to make me rich, but it was enough to give me options. To my parents, that money was not mine. It was an available resource, a family resource, a Preston Rescue Fund. A week after the money landed in my account, my father invited me to Sunday dinner. My mother made roasted chicken, rosemary potatoes, and a lemon tart she knew I liked, because Vivian always preferred manipulation with good table settings. Preston sat at the far end of the table, scrolling on his phone, occasionally glancing up when the conversation mentioned his business. After dessert, my father placed a folder in front of me. Inside was a wire transfer form, $92,000, payable to Marlowe and Steam Holdings. He said Preston needed a temporary bridge, 6 months, maybe less. He said family steps in when one of its own is in trouble. He said my grandmother would have wanted the money to do something meaningful. He said all of this without asking whether I agreed. My mother dabbed the corner of her mouth with a napkin and said, softly, "Your brother is under tremendous pressure, sweetheart." Preston didn't even look embarrassed. He kept his eyes on his phone. I looked at the transfer form. I looked at my father's signature already marked in the places where he expected mine to follow. Then I slid the folder back across the table and said, "No." The room changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. My father's jaw tightened. My mother's eyes filled with the kind of tears she could summon when she needed witnesses. Preston finally looked up. In the Marlowe family, a daughter refusing to sacrifice for the golden son was not a boundary. It was treason. My father said I was being selfish. My mother said I was abandoning my brother. Preston said he could not believe I was making this about money. That sentence almost made me laugh. I left before dessert plates were cleared. The next morning, I packed my apartment, shut down my old phone, changed every password I could think of, and left Asheville without a forwarding address. I did not know yet that my parents would turn my exit into a public diagnosis. At first, their lie was simple. Elise was overwhelmed. Elise needed time. Elise was receiving professional care. Please respect our privacy. It was perfect, really. It explained why I was gone without forcing them to admit what had happened. It made them look loving instead of controlling. It turned my refusal into their tragedy. But then something happened that changed the lie from image control into a business model. People began sending sympathy. Then they sent money. Aunt Marianne mailed $4,000. Uncle Howard sent $7,500. One of my father's country club friends sent $3,000 with a note about the importance of mental health. My mother began sending email updates, each more dramatic than the last. She said insurance had denied full coverage. She said the European facility required a deposit. She said my treatment was delicate, private, and expensive. There was no facility, there was no doctor, there was no treatment. The money went into my father's personal account, and from there into Marlowe and Steam, where it kept Preston's failing coffee shops alive for a few more weeks at a time. I might not have known how far they were going if my father had not made his first serious mistake. 3 days before I left the country, I received a fraud alert from my bank. Someone had presented a medical power of attorney claiming I was incapacitated and requested a freeze on my assets. I sat in an airport lounge, staring at the notification, and felt no panic at all. Panic wastes oxygen. My father had taken the lie he told the town and tried to turn it into a legal instrument. He wanted the $96,000 before I could move it. He had a forged document, a friendly notary, and the confidence of a man who had spent decades being believed. But my grandmother had prepared me for men like him. I opened my laptop and filed the documents for a new limited liability company, Vale Reserve LLC. Then I initiated the transfer. $96,000 moved out of my personal account and into the company account before my father could touch it. My personal balance dropped to almost nothing. Minutes later, a text arrived from an unknown number. "Where is the money, Elise?" It was my father. I blocked the number. Then I walked to an electronics store inside the terminal and bought a biometric hardware security key, a small metal device, plain, almost boring, but stronger than any childhood secret my father could use against me. I connected it to my email, bank accounts, cloud storage, property records, and every digital doorway into my life. From that moment on, my father could know my birthday, my social security number, my first school, my first pet, my mother's maiden name. None of it mattered. He could not fake my fingerprint. He could not hold a key he did not possess. I boarded a flight to Portugal with no money in my personal name, no forwarding address, and no intention of asking permission to survive. Lisbon was not glamorous at first. My apartment was on the 5th floor of a narrow building, on a steep street where the stairs smelled faintly of dust, salt, and old stone. The window looked out over red rooftops and, if I leaned far enough, a strip of the Tagus River. I had one desk, one chair, one laptop, a kettle, and the kind of silence that feels frightening until you realize no one can use it against you. That was where I built VeilGrid Systems. The idea was simple, but the execution was not. Commercial buildings waste enormous amounts of energy because they respond too late. Heating systems overcompensate. Cooling systems run when rooms are empty. Hotels, malls, offices, and industrial sites bleed money through patterns no one bothers to predict. VeilGrid used weather data, occupancy behavior, historical consumption, utility pricing, and machine learning to anticipate energy demand before it happened. Not react, predict, control. Optimize. While Asheville believed I was unstable, I was building software that could stabilize entire buildings. While my mother told relatives I could not think clearly, I was writing algorithms that mapped energy behavior across thousands of variables. I worked 18-hour days. I drank bitter coffee, slept in pieces, and coded until the sun came up over the rooftops. Whenever exhaustion hit, I remembered the wire transfer form sliding across my parents' dining table. I remembered Preston not looking up. I remembered my aunt's card telling me not to be ashamed. Shame is powerful only when you accept the role assigned to you. I rejected mine. My only connection back into the Marlowe family was Simone, Preston's wife. Simone Hayes Marlowe was a risk auditor in Atlanta, sharp, controlled, and impossible for my mother to manipulate. Vivian disliked her from the beginning because Simone refused to perform. She did not laugh on command. She did not cry when Vivian needed emotional support for a scene she was directing. She watched. She listened. She calculated. Simone and I had never been best friends in the traditional sense, but we recognized each other. At family dinners, when Preston exaggerated his success, or my father disguised commands as advice, Simone and I would exchange one glance across the table. That was enough. After I left, Simone messaged me through an encrypted app. They are using your name to collect money. No greeting, no drama, just data. Over the following months, Simone became the eyes inside the house. She recorded dates, names, amounts, bank movements, email copies, and scanned documents. She built a spreadsheet with the precision of a woman who understood that truth without structure can be dismissed as emotion. Red cells for donations, blue cells for fake invoices, yellow cells for relatives contacted, black cells for transfers into Marlowe and Steam. One night, at 2:14 a.m. Lisbon time, she sent me a scan that changed everything. It was an invoice from a private psychiatric clinic in Vienna. Patient name, Elise Marlowe. 28 days of inpatient treatment, medication management, trauma stabilization. Personalized therapy, total balance due, $58,400. It looked professional at first glance. Clean margins, elegant logo, international payment details. But when I zoomed in, I saw the tax identification format was wrong. The logo was a stock template. The address spacing was inconsistent. My father had always loved documents. He knew how official paper could make ordinary people stop questioning things. But he did not know enough about European billing systems to fool someone who was looking closely. My parents had moved beyond gossip. They had manufactured a fake medical invoice and distributed it to solicit money through email and mail. The total Simone had tracked was approaching $47,000. That was the moment my family dispute became a documented financial fraud operation. I wanted to expose them immediately. I wanted to send the spreadsheet to every aunt, every uncle, every neighbor who had whispered about me. But emotion is expensive. I was 3 weeks away from my first serious valuation review. Valagrid was gaining traction with pilot customers in Lisbon, Madrid, and Milan. If I detonated a public scandal too early, I would become the founder with family chaos attached to her name. Investors hate chaos when they cannot measure it, so I waited. I secured my patents under Veil Reserve. I kept my personal identity quiet. I separated every asset from my family's reach. By the end of 2024, Veil Grid Systems received a preliminary valuation of $6.8 million. I did not celebrate. I closed the valuation report, made tea, and went back to work. Celebration is useful only after the walls are finished. In early 2025, Alderbridge Capital contacted us. $15 million in potential Series A funding. Enough to hire engineers, expand servers, enter new markets, and move from promising startup to serious infrastructure company. But serious money comes with serious scrutiny. Alderbridge hired Rowan Hale, a corporate due diligence investigator, to inspect my background. I didn't know that until Simone sent me a photo of a gray sedan parked outside my parents' street in Asheville. A man in a dark coat was knocking on doors with a notepad. He asked when I had left, whether I had seemed unstable, whether my parents had mentioned treatment. Within an hour, Simone had his license plate. Within 2, I had his name, Rowan Hale, former financial crimes analyst, now private investigator contracted by Alderbridge Capital. If Rowan filed his report based on neighborhood interviews, the $15 million would disappear. Not because the software failed, not because the business was weak, but because my parents had created a rumor strong enough to poison my credibility before I walked into the room. I sent Rowan an email with one sentence in the subject line. You are asking the wrong questions in Asheville. The body contained a secure video link. He joined 6 minutes later from his rental car. Snow dotted the windshield behind him. His face was neutral, professional, unreadable. I held my passport to the camera. Then I turned my laptop toward the window so he could see Lisbon, the tiled rooftops, the river light, the city very much not resembling a psychiatric facility. Then I shared my screen and opened the live Veilgrid dashboard. real-time energy patterns from pilot buildings, predictive load curves, automated optimization suggestions, active client data. I watched his expression change by less than a millimeter. That was enough. Then I sent the evidence: the forged power of attorney attempt, the Vienna invoice, Vivian's donation emails, Simone's ledger, bank transfers into Marlowe and Steam, my security alerts, my property protection filings. I did not ask him to lie to Alderbridge. I asked him to investigate accurately. I told him the real risk was not my mental stability. The real risk was a localized family fraud ring attempting to interfere with a founder's assets and reputation. A founder who had already identified the threat, isolated it, documented it, and contained it. Rowan understood the value of a better report. Over the next 72 hours, he worked with Simone. He interviewed relatives under the guise of verifying medical payment irregularities. Aunt Marianne gave him copies of emails from Vivian. Uncle Howard showed his canceled check. A former friend of my father forwarded the Vienna invoice. Rowan confirmed enough physical evidence to support what Simone had already mapped digitally. By the time I flew to London, the folder in my bag was no longer a personal defense. It was a risk management portfolio. That is why, when Clara Whitestone prepared to ask me about concerning personal background anomalies, I did not wait. I controlled the first sentence. Before we talk about the $15 million, I need to explain why my parents have told everyone in Asheville that I'm locked inside a psychiatric hospital. Then I opened the folder. Page by page, I showed them the mechanics of the lie. My grandmother's inheritance, the $92,000 demand, my refusal, my parents' fabricated treatment story, the attempted seizure of my bank account, the fake Vienna invoice, the $47,000 in donations, the transfers into Preston's business, the investigators' independent findings, the legal separation of my company assets. I spoke without trembling because there was nothing left to defend emotionally. The evidence defended itself. Clara read in silence. The two junior partners stopped typing. One of them turned back several pages to examine the money flow chart again. Investors understand fraud. They understand liability. They understand founders who panic, founders who hide, founders who explain too much and prove too little. I had done the opposite. I had mapped the threat like an infrastructure problem. Clara finally closed the folder and looked at me. Most founders hide liabilities, she said. You isolated yours, documented it, and turned it into a controllable variable. The term sheet was signed that afternoon. $15 million approved for Veilgrid Systems. I walked out into the London rain with the biggest professional victory of my life sitting in my inbox. I did not call my parents. I did not post a quote about resilience. I did not buy champagne. I opened my laptop in the back of the car and reviewed engineering hires. Because revenge was not the goal. Freedom was. But back in Asheville, my father was preparing one final theft. Before I left America, I owned a small two-bedroom house outside the city. Nothing extravagant. A quiet place I had bought myself. The mortgage was being paid automatically through an escrow account. The property had appreciated, and my father knew it. When donations slowed and Preston's coffee shop slid toward collapse, Grant decided to pull equity from my house. $185,000. He had enough personal information to attempt the application. Social security number, childhood addresses, school names, first pet. He logged into the lender portal and answered the first security questions correctly. Then he submitted the loan request. The system asked for my biometric hardware key, the same small device I had bought in the airport months earlier. Grant could not provide it. The portal locked. The alert reached me in London. I pulled over at a cafe, opened my secure dashboard, and saw the attempted equity extraction in real time. Within minutes, I called Julian Mercer, a property attorney in North Carolina who specialized in title defense. I explained the situation without using the phrase family misunderstanding. Julian filed a contested title notice and fraud alert with the county clerk. It did not require a dramatic courtroom hearing. It required one precise filing. My house became radioactive to lenders. No bank would approve a new loan, title transfer, or equity line with an active dispute warning attached. The next morning, Grant went to a local bank with his forged documents. The loan officer ran the title search and refused to proceed. My father left empty-handed. That was when the illusion began cracking for him. How could a daughter supposedly locked away in a European hospital file a targeted legal barrier in North Carolina overnight? How could someone he had publicly described as helpless keep closing doors before he reached them? He did not know where I was. He did not know what I had built. He did not know the lie he created was about to collapse in front of the exact audience he had been performing for. The collapse began with a journalist. Mira Caldwell from Global Builder magazine contacted me about a profile on VailGrid. She had tracked our pilot results, our energy savings data, and the Alderbridge investment. But her research team had also found strange rumors in Asheville. A mental health crisis, a sudden disappearance, a family asking for privacy. Mira asked if I wanted to address it. I did not want to bury the rumor. I wanted reality to make it irrelevant. I invited her to Lisbon. She arrived on a windy Tuesday morning and walked through our office overlooking the river. Engineers at work. Dashboards active. Client calls in progress. Data moving across screens in clean, undeniable patterns. Not a hospital. Not a retreat. Not a fragile woman hidden from the world. A company. A functioning, funded, expanding company. During the interview, Mira asked about the rumors. I did not name my parents. I did not cry. I simply said, when a woman refuses to be financially useful to a controlling family, people often invent a diagnosis for her independence. That was all I needed the article to say. I did not need a tabloid confession. I needed my face, my company, my timeline, and the $15 million investment printed where the right people would see it. Vivian unknowingly chose the perfect stage for the truth. That summer, she hosted the Marlowe family reunion at the Asheville house. 52 relatives, family friends, and community acquaintances gathered under white tents and soft string lights. Caterers moved through the backyard. My mother had arranged flowers in pale colors, the kind used for memorial services without admitting it. In the living room, she created a display of my childhood photos. Elise at 7, missing a front tooth. Elise at 13, holding a school award. Elise at 17, standing beside my grandmother Beatrice. In the center of the mantel sat a donation box with a small card. For Elise's continued healing. My father stood near the fireplace in a crisp shirt, holding a glass, his face arranged into dignified sorrow. He spoke about the agony of watching a child suffer. He described sleepless nights, European doctors, difficult decisions, and the crushing cost of specialized care. He thanked the family for standing with them. Envelopes went into the box. Aunt Marianne placed one inside with both hands. Uncle Howard nodded gravely. People whispered that my parents were so strong. Simone stood near the kitchen, wearing a black dress, holding sparkling water. In her handbag was a signed divorce petition. At exactly 3 o'clock, the Global Builder profile went live. Minutes later, a regional North Carolina business newsletter picked it up automatically. The headline read, Asheville native Elise Marlowe builds $15 million energy tech company in Lisbon. 31,000 subscribers received it. Bankers, business owners, local officials, neighbors, and several dozen people standing inside my parents' living room. The first phone vibrated, then another, then a chorus of them. Aunt Marianne opened hers first. She expected a weather alert or a text from a friend. Instead, she saw my face. I was not wearing a hospital gown. I was not pale under fluorescent clinic lights. I was standing in a glass office in Lisbon wearing a white suit, with VailGrid dashboards behind me. Founder and CEO. $15 million. Alderbridge Capital. Energy technology expansion across Europe. Marianne read the first paragraph. Then she looked at the donation box, then at the childhood photos, then at my father. One by one, others opened the article. The room lost its sound. Conversation stopped. Forks paused halfway to plates. The string quartet outside kept playing, but inside, the air changed from sympathy to calculation. People read the timeline. VailGrid founded during the months my mother claimed I was entering treatment. Investor meetings during the weeks my father claimed he was wiring money to a clinic. Lisbon headquarters during the period Vivian described me as unreachable and unstable. The math did not bend for them. The lie broke instead. My mother tried to recover. Of course she did. Vivian stepped forward, voice trembling, and said the article could be fake. Maybe artificial intelligence. Maybe hackers. Maybe I was being exploited by people who wanted to use our family pain for publicity. But the article had investor quotes, corporate records, office photos, technical metrics, a funding announcement, a journalist's byline. A lie can survive gossip. It cannot survive documentation. Aunt Marianne lifted her phone toward my father and asked one simple question. Then where did my money go? He did not answer. Before anyone else could speak, there was a knock at the front door. Not a polite doorbell. A hard, official knock. My father opened it, and two process servers stepped inside. The first one confirmed his name and handed him a thick stack of legal documents. My lawsuit, defamation, financial fraud, fabrication of medical invoices, attempted theft of personal assets, attempted unauthorized home equity extraction. Attached exhibits included the donation ledger, forged invoices, bank transfers, emails, investigator findings, and property security alerts. Aunt Marianne saw her $4,000 listed. Uncle Howard saw his $7,500. Others saw their names, their checks, their kindness converted into evidence. The second process server walked past my parents and handed Preston a separate envelope, his divorce papers. Simone did not move toward him. She did not comfort him. She did not explain herself. She placed her glass on the counter, picked up her coat, and walked out of the house. No shouting, no final speech, just exit. Sometimes the cleanest ending is the one that gives the toxic room nothing left to feed on. After that day, the Marlowe family collapsed quickly. The relatives demanded repayment, not apologies, not explanations, money. They threatened to contact federal authorities if Grant and Vivian did not return every dollar. My parents had already poured the funds into Preston's collapsing business, so they began liquidating the life they had used to impress everyone. Jewelry, antiques, cars, retirement accounts. Then the house. The white railings, the trimmed hedges, the perfect porch sold. Marlowe and Steam died next. Without stolen money flowing in, vendors cut service, landlords filed notices, and the imported espresso machines were tagged for auction. Preston lost the business, the wife, and the illusion that charm could replace competence. Eventually, he took a job as an operations assistant for a property management company in Charlotte. On his first morning, his supervisor gave him login credentials for the building energy platform they used across their commercial sites. Preston typed the password. The screen loaded. The VailGrid Systems logo appeared. He sat frozen in his chair. Every report he filed, every energy alert he checked, every efficiency recommendation he followed came from software built by the sister he had expected to fund his failure. I did not need his apology. I had become part of the structure of his working life. My parents tried to contact me after the house sold. The message came from a prepaid number. "We lost everything. We are your parents. Can we please put this behind us and be a family again?" I read it once. There was no apology, no accountability, no admission of forged documents, stolen donations, public humiliation, or attempted theft. Only loss, their discomfort, their desire to reset the game now that they were losing. I deleted the message and blocked the number. Forgiveness without accountability is not healing. It is reopening the door for the same hand that already stole from you. The court case ended quietly. My parents failed to mount a real defense. The evidence was too clean, too organized, too public. The judge ruled in my favor and issued a permanent injunction prohibiting Grant and Vivian Marlowe from speaking publicly about my medical history, my company, or any fabricated treatment narrative. If they tried to revive the lie, they would face contempt penalties. The story they built around me was legally terminated, not emotionally debated, not privately negotiated. Terminated. A few months later, Simone arrived in Lisbon. Her divorce was finalized. I met her at the airport with coffee and a contract. Chief Risk Officer, VailGrid Systems. She read it, smiled slightly, and signed. We went straight to the office. No dramatic toast, no speeches about survival. Just two women who had refused to remain supporting characters in a family built around male failure and female sacrifice, now managing a company with real systems, real accountability, and real growth. By the end of 2025, Veilgrid had expanded into Berlin, Milan, and Singapore. On quiet evenings, I sometimes stood on the office balcony overlooking the Tagus River as the city lights reflected on the water. Simone would step outside with compliance updates, investor notes, or coffee, and we would talk about contracts, audits, deployments, hiring. We did not talk about Asheville often. We did not need to. Some pasts do not require constant revisiting once they have been properly filed, documented, sealed, and left behind. My parents had tried to lock me inside a story of illness because they could not tolerate my independence. They tried to use love as a leash, family as an invoice, and reputation as a cage. But cages only work when you stay inside them. I built something else: a company, a record, a legal wall, a life beyond their reach. And that is what people like Grant and Vivian never understand. The most powerful revenge is not screaming the truth in the faces of people committed to misunderstanding you. The most powerful revenge is becoming so stable, so documented, so protected, and so far beyond their control that their lies can no longer find a place to land. They said, I had lost my mind. I built a system that helped cities control their energy. They said I needed saving. I saved myself. They said I was hidden away in shame. I was standing in Lisbon, building a future with my name on it. And when the truth finally reached Asheville, it did not beg to be believed. It arrived with evidence. It arrived with signatures. It arrived with timestamps, bank records, legal filings, and a $15 million headline. Some families build foundations, others build cages, and call them love. The day I left Asheville, my parents thought they had lost a daughter. The truth was simpler than that. They had lost access. And sometimes, that is the beginning of freedom.